Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast Emotional Intelligence, a Catalyst for Collaboration, sponsored by MHS. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI credit and may also be used for SHRM credit. You will receive an email from HR.com within 2 business days, which will include the certification credit information. Or you may also log into HR.com and go to your View My Credits page where you can find all the credits you have received. If you have any questions today, please type them into the Questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will follow up with you. Now, our presenter today is Sarah Turner of the FARO Group. Sarah, please take it away.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate it. So I'm sticking up on the screen a picture of myself, also just a recount of my name and my company logo up there at the top, so you can see that I do work for an organization called the FARO Group. We are based in the Midwest in the U.S. in Indiana, and we service clients of all industries and have a wide variety of locations that we represent, including international. And this happens to be a wonderful opportunity for me to fulfill what I always say is probably one of the things that I've always loved about the potential for growth in any individual capacity, and that's just learning. I love to learn. I read a lot of books, and I'm always willing to listen to other people and learn. But more importantly for me, a capacity within that learning is definitely sharing what I learned. So anytime I have a chance to speak, I always take advantage of it. And if there's even one thing that you can pick up from my experiences, both as a professional in the careers that I've had on my own, but then also as a consultant for the last 16 years in the leadership capacity, I would love for that to happen. So my goal is definitely that you have at least one thing that you can consider either for yourself or for your teams and your organizations that you could do differently, especially around this idea of collaboration. It just so happens that this webinar is sponsored by MHS, and I will just pause for a second and say I'm a huge fan of the organization. They are a wonderful partner of ours. That happens to be the organization that we have leveraged and have a strategic partnership with because we utilize some of their assessments, one of which I'm going to reference today because it happens to be the EQI 2.0, a very relevant point as I'm talking about how emotional intelligence is a catalyst for collaboration. So with that, I happen to be one of those people who starts at a very basic level of understanding whenever I'm learning something. And I always think if I'm going to learn how to do something, I might as well start with what it is that I'm trying to learn. And so I always will kind of go all the way back to a concept of definition. So if you look at the definition of collaborate, as we're trying to embrace how to create a catalyst for that in our own companies and in our own worlds, no better place to do that than the dictionary. So if you go to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, what you'll find is that it shares that collaborate is a verb, and it says that it's to work jointly on an activity, especially to produce or create something. And the moment I saw that in the dictionary, I thought, that's a pretty powerful statement because it's very succinct. It's really easy to understand that if you want to get credit for are we collaborating, you kind of have to do these things. You have to work jointly on something, but specifically to either produce or create it. And that always, to me, when I'm working with organizations, and I will say over the last year, there's been a heavy emphasis of my clients having a pain point with collaboration not really either existing or not being very fluid. And so we've been working with companies, but specifically this last year, really focusing on how do we get them to collaborate. And one of the things that I will instantly do after sharing this definition is just to get them thinking about this question. So if to collaborate is to work jointly together to create something, here's my challenge question to you. What do you create? So when you think about that question, as an individual team within an organization, as a department, as an organization as a whole, what do you create? Or maybe more importantly, what are you supposed to be creating? What does the organization expect that you spend time on working jointly together to produce or create? And so one of the things that I find when I ask this question, a lot of people will be surprised that many people in the room from the same organization, from the same department, may have different perspectives on what we're creating or what we're supposed to create. But one of the ones that probably centralizes most organizations is right down to the mission statement. So you can kind of start from a basic perspective. What are we supposed to be creating? Well, a lot of organizations would heavily rely on either a vision or a mission statement or some sort of values mantra that they try to embed in their culture. And I think this is kind of a fun one for me. I just pulled one of my clients as an example for you. I don't know what your company's mission statement is, but here's an example. One of our clients has this statement as their mission: to build valuable careers with our people and help clients achieve their goals. And I've always loved this one. I think it's a great statement because they've taken two aspects of what they want to focus on. And so here, when asked the question, what do we create? I think if the company is really saying, you know what, we're supposed to be creating really valuable experiences for our employees and wonderful opportunities for our clients to achieve their goals because we're helping support them to get there. And then from there, I think what's awesome is that every single person in the company can be measured against whether or not they're trying to work jointly to do those very things. So whatever your mission statement is, this is a great point of assessment when you start to assess, okay, how are we doing collaborating in my team, in my department, in my company? Well, what are we supposed to be creating? What is expected of us? And then are we doing it? And you could do that as an individual, or you could have a whole team do it, but it really opens the dialogue to, wow, are we working jointly together to create what we're supposed to be creating? And then in the end, I've always thought that you could connect that too to say, well, then how does a company or a group of people really achieve that, really executing their mission and creating those outcomes? One of the things that I would say is often needed if you want to get it done right is that you want to do it all the while creating really cool peak moments. And I think that's when you know that collaboration is happening, because you could probably attempt to achieve a client's expectations and goals, but not create a moment where the client felt like, wow, that was service, and not really be collaborating. You got an outcome, you checked the box, you got a deliverable, but will the client remember that experience? Are they going to refer other people to your organization? Will employees who may or may not be having peak moments, will they refer other people to work there? Because I really think peak moments is important, and I'll elaborate that just a bit further here in a second. But I think for me, in order to achieve your mission and create outcomes, not only do you need to have peak moments, but those peak moments really only happen when you have true collaboration, when people are doing it together and you can really feel it. As a pause moment, I'll tell you, this concept of peak moments actually came to me in the form of being an attendee at a speaking event where one of the authors that I have tracked over my career happened to be a keynote. He was the closing keynote. So I don't know if you're familiar with two brothers named Dan and Sip Heath, but they happen to have a lot of history in research and writings around change management. And their most recent book was released in October of 2017, and it's called The Power of Moments. And I am a huge fan of the book because essentially what they say is that a lot of organizations culturally have an experience that their employees and to a degree their customers walk through that just leaves people feeling very whelmed. And as soon as I heard it that way, I thought, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Because I know what meaning overwhelmed is, right? Either in a good or a bad way. And I kind of know the concept of being underwhelmed, right? That's kind of underwhelming. But the middle ground, nobody ever talks about. We're just being whelmed. And as a team member, I think a lot of times we don't hit that point of collaboration and we're doing stuff. I mean, we're probably executing and checking boxes all day long, but are we going home and to people that we have in our inner circle, are we saying, you know, today was a great day? Because inevitably people ask us at the end of the day, how was your day? And many of us say, oh, it was good. It was fine. And then we don't want to talk about it because we were just whelmed all day long. Well, being in a peak moment is when we feel like we're really in it. We're excited. And when somebody says, how was your day? You can't help but say, oh my gosh, we did something cool today. And we really made progress with this project. Or a customer called in and they said this about what we were doing and it just felt good. And you know it's different. But for me, in an observable moment, in the years I've been consulting, especially from the capacity of teams, I rarely see those peak moments when there wasn't collaboration attached to it. So when it comes to this idea of collaboration, you start to say, all right, well, where can I potentially collaborate then? And I like to throw this question out just to give you a chance to start thinking about it on a personal level. Just what are the various teams that you participate on today where you could potentially collaborate? And I want you to be thinking about this broadly, because when you consider what could go on here, this isn't just your work team. So your team, maybe people that report to you, or a project team that you're on. Those are examples, sure. Could also be your company. You could have a company, the organization as a team. It also could be your family. You could say, hey, my spouse, my significant other, we're kind of a team, or my family. And then you have friends and community opportunities where you could be part of a team. And so you have this list. And when I do this in a live training, I'll give about 3 minutes for people just to brainstorm. What are all the teams that you participate on? And inevitably, most people will come quickly to a point of 5 or 6 or 8. And they're varied, and there's lots of differentials. And then we start to say, okay, so I've thrown out this word team. I've asked you what you participate on, that's a team, and quickly you have this broad scope. But then I start to ask the question, let me challenge you though on what made you a team, right? How did you choose that that was one of your teams? And maybe not a surprise, right? I'm going to go backwards to setting up the stage here. I like to, of course, define it. So if you go to the dictionary on this one always gets me a chuckle, because in the American Heritage Dictionary, when you look up team, the first thing it says is 2 or more draft animals harnessed to a vehicle or farm implement. And the first time I read that, I thought, yep, you know what though? Sometimes that's exactly what we feel like. We feel like we're kind of all draft to some implement and we're kind of herding in the same direction. And yet sometimes we're being labeled as a team. But the minute I read that, I will say, looking back at the years ago that I saw this, I thought, that just doesn't scream, yeah, this is a team. And it certainly doesn't scream collaboration to create something or produce together. So hopefully you'll agree with me. While that's part of the definition, I don't know that that really is what I want us to embrace as a defined team. Fortunately, there is another bullet point. So if you look in the dictionary, it actually has another definition. It says any group organized to work together. And I'll tell you, that's better, right? I think that's better. But again, when I see those words put in place, any group organized to work together, I don't get the sense that that's an automatic team either. And many of you, I hope, can recall a time where someone put you in a room with other people and said, you guys work on this, right? So you were a group and somebody organized you to work together. But to automatically say that you were instantly a team is rare. It takes a lot more than just organize people to work together, giving them the same title or responsibility at the same time. That's not enough. So I'd like to briefly journey through, okay, well, what is a team? How do we define when you hit being an actual team versus being just a group? So I'm a visual learner. I'm not just a person who likes to read, but I also like to look at things and assess them. And so I came across this series of slides that are around a concept. They call them square wheels, but I'm going to show you a series of visuals. And essentially what I want you to do is tell me whether or not I have put in front of you a picture of a team. So based on what you see, here's the first one. So if you just look at it, my question to you is, looking at this, is this a team? And quickly, when I'm in front of people, the response will be to kind of chuckle, because we start to create these analogies to our real world. And we say, you know what, sometimes I feel just like this picture. Because what are you seeing? Well, the first thing you're seeing, I think, that I hope is obvious, is that they're using square wheels. But what do they have at their disposal? What are they carrying around them? Round wheels, likely more efficient, more effective, more productive. But hey, you know what? We've used square wheels forever. So we're gonna keep those. And hey, we've got ideas floating around this company, because in my mind, that's what those tires are. Those round wheels are tons of ideas within your organization, and we're carrying them around. They're here somewhere, but we're not tapping into them. We're not trying them. We're not giving them an opportunity to see if they could make a difference. We're just leaving them there at bay, knowing that, hey, we got to get through the day. So let's keep these wheels on. We'll see where it goes. And so a lot of people, and I hope you agree with me, will say, yeah, this doesn't feel like a team, because they're not thinking smart. They're not working together. Plus, I'm not sure if you see this, but many people that I show this to will tell me that it kind of looks like the back group is pulling back and the front person is pulling forward, meaning they're not actually going in the same direction. So maybe we've got lack of communication there too. So if you agree with me, this is not yet a team. Let me change the visual and see if we're getting closer. So here we've got a new one. Not a lot of alterations, except there's one distinct difference. Now it's obvious these two are pulling in opposite directions. And so the question that I have for you as you look at this, is this a team? And most of us say, okay, yeah, no, it's probably not a team. We're still carrying the resources we're not using, and now we're actually on purpose going in a different direction. When you see this, again, does this happen to you? In your organization, in your team, in your department, are you at odds with each other? Are there times where you just feel like you are on a completely different paradigm in thinking and perspective, and you're actually going a different direction? So when we see this, we feel it. It's very synonymous with lots of our cultures, but we don't automatically see that it's a deterrent to collaboration. It's happening, but are we addressing it? So if this isn't a team, we got another one. So we look here, are we making any progress? And this one always kind of gets me a laugh from an audience too, because this one, what are they trying to do? And when you look at it, one of the things that you'll notice is that, okay, one of the wheels broke, which, you know what, happens at our companies all the time. Something doesn't go the way we planned. Happens every day. Some of you, it happened right before you jumped on this call, right? It's right in front of us. But what do we do? How do we address it? Well, in this case, what did they choose to do? Well, they've chosen to take the old way of doing it and stick it right back on, which of course embodies the definition of insanity, right? We keep doing the same thing over and over, but we expect that somehow that next square wheel is going to get us faster and more efficient results, but it's not. And the other thing that people will point out is, you know what, Sarah, the other thing too with this one, the guy in the middle holding up the wagon and the guy changing the wheel kind of seem like they're the only ones doing any work, which again, people will say happens at our company all the time. There's different levels of engagement, different levels of work ethic, and some people carry the load. And so again, is that the definition of collaborating, working jointly? Is it okay to work jointly, but one person's doing 90% of the work and the other person, you know, they're working jointly, but they're only doing 10% of the work? I can't imagine the person doing 90% would agree that that's collaboration. But the other thing that might not have occurred to you, and somebody always points it out, is, hey, what about the horse? And somebody will always say, that's new, right? And it's interesting because we do have new resources join our team all the time. But how are we treating them? Do we keep them at an arm's distance until we learn who they are, what they have to offer, and we keep our tight-knit ideas until eventually they prove themselves, or maybe we can pull them in? And that distance, what is it doing to them and their engagement? Do they feel like they're part of a team? And are they already creating peak moments? I doubt when they're at that far of a distance seeing what you're doing, that they're going home saying, yeah, I was part of something today. So this isn't a team either. And so as we go through these start to speed up. Now we've got something, right? It's like, okay, is this a team? And obviously we've got some progress here. That's a truth. But one of the things that this, I think, is analogous to in our companies is that 50% of the team said, yes, we need to change. Let's try something new. Let's do it. Here's great ideas. And the other 50% is digging in their heels and they're saying, no, I'm not changing. We shouldn't change for change's sake. Or they'll make some reason up to just hold their ground. And the question is, are you really accomplishing your mission? Are you creating peak moments when only half of the team is on board? Probably not. So how about now, right? So now we got all the square wheels off. That's something. That's a good thing. And we're trying out the wheels, the round ones, only as you can probably see, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. And this is very representative of silos in our companies. So now, it's like, what is going on? Everybody's kind of trying their own thing. Are they sharing perspectives? We don't know. Are they learning? Are they growing? Are they moving? Well, that wagon doesn't appear to be any closer to where they want to go, right? So now we've got this, everybody's kind of doing their lone wolf thing, not collaboration. So we're not there yet. So then I say, okay, how about this? Now you've got one person who says, hey, what if we took the wheel and the horse and added them both to the wagon? Two perspectives working jointly together to create a potential outcome. Definitely progress. And so eventually we say then, okay, is this success? Is this graphic success? We got the wagon ready to go and we're excited and we feel great about it. And on one hand, we almost want to say yes, unless, that's the moment, right? Unless somebody else was able to collaborate quicker, faster, better because we took too long to figure out what collaboration was. To be able to say this, I think, is important. Collaboration is critical. It's probably one of the most important things that you're ever going to have that will give you a chance to create something that is unique, that is a differentiator, both for the people doing the work, the employee, and the person receiving it. Could be internal or external clients. But we don't sometimes address that we're not collaborating. It's like nobody's willing to say this isn't working, let's find a way. So we keep doing these old ways of doing something, and then somebody, that airplane, which represents a competitor of ours, figured it out sooner and got there and took the business or took the employee away from us. And in the end, it's probably what got in our own way was our inability to see that it was happening. So if you look at this visual set and you start to assess, that's really me giving you a chance to see there is a difference between being a team and being a group. So what is a team? This is one of my favorite statements. I've always felt this is really great. It's all encompassing. Here's what a team is. You want to get credit for being a team. You got to have people who trust one another and communicate effectively as they work enthusiastically toward a common goal. And so here's a moment where you start to say, you know what, okay, that gives me something to assess against. I start to look at the people around me and I'm trying to figure out, are we a team? Well, hey, do they trust each other? You can measure that. You can get a sense for that. Even if it's anecdotal or intangible, you can get a sense for that. Are we communicating effectively? Are people being open and straightforward and honest with transparency and really connecting? And are they on the same page? Do they have an understanding of what we're supposed to be creating? Have they bought into the mission of who we are and the integrity of our organization, and they know it well enough and how it connects to their role that they are on the same page with each other? If you can do those things, then that can tell you that you are in fact a team. So what I'd like you to do is I want you to go back, if you took a moment to think about the teams that you were on a few moments ago. So when I asked, what teams are you a part of? And you had a chance to really think about what that might include. Now's my chance to ask you, out to the margin, if you wrote them down, or just in your mind, assign it a letter. You're either a G or a T. And so I want you to think about that. All the teams that you could potentially be a part of, are you a group or are you a team? Because you only get credit for a team if, of course, you're collaborating, you're working jointly together to create something, but you're doing it in a trusting environment where you're communicating effectively and you're working towards something that everybody knows they're supposed to be on and doing. And I have to laugh because you know what? Sometimes we're not. And sometimes we ebb and flow between being a group and a team. And I'll just give you a quick personal example. Sometimes our family units, our spouse, our significant other, we can be a big G. And I always say that about my family. I mean, there are days my husband and I are on the same page with parenting. Yep, same page, and we are totally a team. And then there are days where we are not on the same page and I think, yep, we are definitely a group today. And we are organized to work together because we have the same children, but that's about as far as we go. So you have to be careful not to always assume just because you were organized to work together, you're already a team. And the important thing that you need to keep in mind is, why did you pick a G or T? Because the why is a very important element as it relates to what you can do with the answer. Because some of your teams are new, and maybe the only thing holding them back from being a team is that they just don't have trust yet. But you know what? That's normal. So then you just say, I'm going to focus on building trust. I think they know the common goal, and I feel like we're relatively good communicators, but it's the trust factor. For others on this call, you might have situations where I feel like we trust each other, but I think we don't really know where we're supposed to be spending our time. You know, I don't know that as an organization, we're very transparent about where we all fit in, and that's kind of a roadblock. Okay, find the why. Then you can focus. One of my favorite roadblocks that many of the groups that I work with who aren't yet teams comes in the factor of accountability. So that could be an example. You just don't hold each other accountable. All right, well, we're not a team. We're not jointly supporting each other. And this next statement, it's called the circle of blame, actually comes from John Miller. He has a book called the QBQ, and it's all around accountability. But one of my favorite things that he shares in the book, the QBQ, is this statement. He says, the circle of blame. Well, here's how it starts. So something goes wrong and the CEO blames the VP, who blames the manager, who blames the employee, who blames the customer, who blames the government, who blames the people, who blame the politicians, who blame the schools, who blame the parents, who blame the teens, who blame the dad, who blames the mom, who blames her manager, who blames the VP, who blames the CEO, and on it goes. And as I saw what he wrote, I thought, you know what, that is so true, because you are never too far from someone you can think of that might be able to take some of the blame. and deflect it from ourselves. And sometimes it's not even intentional. And one of the groups of people that I find often get the blame when a work team is not succeeding, sometimes it's the client. Well, the client's not responding, or we're not finding out what we need, or it could be an internal client, another department they're bottlenecking the process. And what he says in that book is, if you want to be seen as accountable, then you're spending time in the wrong places. You're actually blame-storming, which I think is a phenomenal term that he came up with. So instead of brainstorming on what we can do to solve a problem, we're brainstorming on who we're going to point the fingers to. And so for me, whatever the reason, whether it's this example of, hey, we're not really holding each other accountable, or maybe it's another reason, we don't trust each other or we don't communicate, find the why you're a G, and then transform by action and very strategic and intentional effort to move you from a G to a T. And so one of the things I wanted to focus on in this presentation was things I have seen work. And no doubt for me, this is a biggie. What I have found is that when you can increase the usage of emotional intelligence within a work group, you can create productive outcomes like a team. And so that one thing to me was just this pinnacle effort that over the last couple of years, we've really embedded in our talent development strategies with our clients, and we're seeing some phenomenal results. Now, specifically, we're going to show you a model that can get you there, and I'm going to point to you about 4 or 5 skills that if you can develop on your team, it's just a real starter as that catalyst starts to form. But I do want to at least get you thinking about why this matters. Why would emotional intelligence matter to team effectiveness? And one of my favorite examples of why it can show up and be important comes from a quick challenge of what are some examples that you've seen where an emotion happening in a work setting impaired someone's performance, right? So this is you just kind of pausing to think for a second around, have I seen that? And what does that look like? And then the opposite of that is, have you ever seen an emotion, right? A response to the environment we're in at work fuel someone's performance, right? Because of that reaction, that actually created some cool things, some great outcomes. Now, when I ask people this, there's tons of examples, but I'll give you a few of my favorites. And of course, you're welcome to contribute if you have a good one, and I'll let Sherry tell me if you have any, but I'll share with you a couple to get us started. So when it comes to emotions impairing us at work, one of the first things I will often hear is, yeah, we have this guy in our company who just flies off the handle. Right? So when things aren't going well, he just lays into us. And so the emotion, of course, is his frustration or anger about the work team not getting it done. And so what does he choose to do? He throws at them some things that he's disappointed in, or he kind of uses a curt tone or a loud voice, and he flies off the handle. The response is generally not seen by the recipients as, yes, he yelled at us again. This is awesome. Love working here. So most people will agree with me. That one kind of falls in the impairment, because a lot of people walk out feeling like, okay, they've just been kicked. They already knew things weren't going well. So pointing out the obvious and being rude and belligerent is not helpful. And nobody's more motivated than they were before. So we put that in the impairment category. And then you could also have even a simple example of resentment. That's an emotion. So maybe a peer got an opportunity in the organization that you wanted and you didn't get. And you have this small amount of jealousy or resentment that wasn't your opportunity. And I've seen people, man, their attitude changes 180. I mean, I've even to a point of coaching people in my career, I've told them they likely have become version 2.0 of themselves, a completely different version, because they're harboring that resentment. Definitely an impairment. And it affects our teams, because when I'm one of those people that's supposed to be collaborating and I'm holding back, or I'm just not getting involved, or I'm at 10% of my work energy, people are going to notice, and that impairs us as a team. Then on the other side, how do emotions facilitate someone's performance? So a couple of examples that often get shared with me, easy one is excitement, right? So when we get an opportunity that is an assignment or in a project capacity that we've always been interested in, and all of a sudden we get to work on it together, we get excited, and that might make us be driven and hardworking and just completely focused and channeled, all with this goal. I want to hit a home run. I want to create effectiveness with this because this is so exciting. And then another one on the emotions that facilitate, a lot of people will tell me challenge. And they'll say, man, I have to say I'm a challenge person, and You tell me something can't be done, oh my gosh, forget about it. I am going to work even harder. And I'm going to use that emotion to facilitate me being a better version of me than I was before the challenge. All four of those examples are great in connecting that emotions, our response to the stimuli in our environment, will definitely fuel us to a really great, cool outcome or could hold us back. But I hope someone listening has figured this out, because I want to point something out. Almost always when I ask for examples, people will tell me that the emotions that impair are the negative emotions. And they'll say anger and frustration and resentment and jealousy. Yeah, they impair us for sure. And as a team, we're going to get affected. And then the emotions that facilitate, they'll say things like excitement or drive or happiness or challenge. And then I'll say, you know what, though? Let's just think about this. Is it possible you could have a negative-based emotion fuel performance, like create facilitated outcomes? And somebody quickly will say, oh, gosh, yeah, I've seen somebody who was failing on a project as a team. And because they were failing and they could not stand to lose, they said, we are going to fix this problem and we are going to work on it and we're going to get it right and we're going to do it together, and created some cool things. And they used that frustration for not succeeding to succeed. And I thought, that's awesome. And then here's a funny one. I had a guy tell me, hey, yeah, and there are some emotions that are positive based that can impair. And he said he had a female coworker who had gotten engaged over the weekend, and on a Monday morning she comes in, and he said at 8 o'clock she's telling her story and she's so excited, like she couldn't be more excited. But he said, you know, like 10 o'clock she's still telling the story, and at 3 o'clock she's still telling the story. And then he realized, okay, she's been here all day and she hasn't done anything at work. And so the difference between impairment and facilitating results is not the exact emotion. It's whether or not you have emotional intelligence to fuel what to do with the response. So when you can teach a team some very fundamental skills of how to channel those responses that, oh, by the way, are going to happen every day. To say that you can leave your emotions at the door, which is a phrase, by the way, that I've never been fond of, because whoever said that wasn't thinking. To leave challenge and excitement and frustration, which could fuel you to performance at home because you think it's not worthy at work, is a detriment to your team. But channel them. Tell them, how do you respond to the stimuli that's going to come at you? It's going to happen. But how do you differentiate yourself as a team? Well, it begins, no surprise, by helping people realize what it is. And I will say, I'm so glad to know that over the last couple of years, more and more people that I speak to are learning and knowing already what emotional intelligence is about. But in case it helps, let's just be succinct. What is it? One of my favorite definitions comes from the book, The EQ Edge, which happens to be a resource designed by the tool model, the EQI 2.0, and the creators of that tool, which is where the sponsorship of MHS comes into play. So let me make sure that you know what that means, though. What is emotional intelligence? It's a set of emotional and social skills that, when you put them all together, help you do a couple of things. First, it helps you perceive and express yourself. No doubt that's valuable to a team. One of my favorites, it helps you not only develop relationships with other team members, but maintain them. That's different. A very important one, EI also helps you cope with challenges. And one of my favorite aspects of this definition is that it's just you being able to use emotional information, so the stimuli in your environment, both at home and at work, but in an effective and meaningful way. Can you channel your response so that more often than not, you get a facilitated outcome? Because in the end, I'll tell you, more and more research is proving this last statement to be true, that emotional intelligence happens to be one of the biggest predictors of success in both our lives and in our careers. And so helping a team really grow in these areas can only be an advantage. So let me introduce to you the model. So this is the model we use. We're such a huge fan of it. We've looked for a supportive tool for probably 5 to 7 years. And it wasn't until we came across this one about 3 years ago that comes from MHS that we felt like really represented a measurement of somebody's EI. Just quickly, you can see this model is based on 5 major composites of behavior. So kind of 5 places that we show up in the world every day. And so you've got self-perception, which very nicely connects to how we express the things we know about ourselves, which definitely leads us to interpersonal relationships being built, which all supports how we make decisions. And one of my favorite differentiators of this tool is that there's a whole facet on stress management. And all of these are supportive of team effectiveness. Now, the model has, in their 5 composites of behavior, 3 skills each. So there's really 15 measurable skills that we like to work on with the teams that we support. And on the outer rim is one of my favorite aspects. So let me just point this out to you, and then we're going to talk about some of these skills. So on the outer rim, there's this thing called well-being. And this particular tool actually measures a person's level of contentment. And when you look at that, there's a direct correlation then to how they perform. And I can kind of prove this to you if you think of it this way. If you look at those skills on the inner wheel of this model, something like assertiveness or flexibility or even problem solving. And if I just decide today, you know what, I don't want to use those. Yeah, just I don't have it in me. I'm just not up for it. So I'm not going to be assertive today. And I'm not going to be flexible, and I'm just not going to be a problem solver. And I contract my usage of these. So if you can imagine this wheel getting smaller and it contracts, one of the things that is corollary is that outer rim, my contentment, also contracts. Because when I'm not productive and I'm not open and I'm not listening and I'm not creating solutions, very rarely do we feel more satisfied. Most of the time, we feel less satisfied with ourselves. But the reverse is true as well. When we can help people grow in these areas and they become more independent and higher in self-regard and more empathetic to people and really good with things like stress tolerance. And today I used those and I was intentional. And that wheel gets bigger because my usage grows. So does my well-being. And, no surprise, my performance. So the amount of correlation between the usage of these skills in this model and the outcomes, I will say it's definitely proven. There's science behind the model, but I will just tell you experientially, having used it for 3 years, we have not had anything even close to this. And what I will tell you is that some of the key areas on this wheel that are specifically supportive of team effectiveness happen to be, I'll just point out 5 of them. The first of which is self-awareness, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. Also closely attached is impulse control. So when I'm aware of what's going on in my team and I have a pause button, great combo right there. Now, after I pause, then how do I express what I'm thinking in a way that includes others? So I'm using an empathetic point of view, but all to the greater good of the team, of the company, and of the people we serve. That 5-skill combo for us seems to be very powerful. All 15, every single one will help you as a team. But these happen to be some I really wanted to highlight. So let me journey down there as the latter part of our conversation evolves to helping you see how this could really potentially be a resource for you. So the first one is self-awareness. And I always say, okay, where do you begin? Either individually or as a team. If you're going to focus on EI, we've always felt like the bricks and mortar, the foundation of what you are doing in EI comes from self-awareness. Now that's our opinion only. There's no scientific research that says you got to start here, but we've just always migrated to, you kind of have to see it. You have to know what's going on before you can use it. So in this regard, we define what self-awareness is by letting you see that it's not just recognizing your feelings and understanding them. It also involves exploring what caused them. So recognizing, of course, that you're sad or you're excited, but also understanding the impact of where they came from and how that affects other people. That to me is the combo. It's not enough to say, you know what, I know I'm frustrated with what we're doing because we're not hitting a home run and we're supposed to hit a home run. But it's also, why am I so frustrated? Where does that come from? Is it because we're not working together as a team? Is it because I'm frustrated we're not talking to each other? Is it because I feel like we're kind of using different points of perspective and we should be trying to vet that with each other? What is the reason I'm frustrated? Only then can your self-awareness help you. So here, what we try to do is put it in perspective this way, because I love this statement. If you cannot recognize where you're at, right, your perspective, and you can't take what I love is a great phrase, your emotional temperature, then you end up being at risk of behaving potentially in a demeaning, an angry, a belittling, or a belligerent way. And almost always that turns people off. In fact, what we've seen firsthand is that people will flee from you when you can't understand how your emotional temperature matters to them, because it does, especially on a team. And it ends up coming out as a negative, not a positive. And so working on this as a team can be a crucial element to starting that catalyst of collaboration. So an example of how we do it is to first get people to answer this true-false question. So true-false, it says there are social, mental, and physical consequences to our ability or inability to deal with our emotions. When you are not dealing with your emotions and you're frustrated, but you're not dealing with it, do you think that there are physical consequences? That there are signs that you're frustrated? Yeah, maybe a clenched fist, clenched jaw, a red splotchy skin, because a lot of us kind of get overheated when we're frustrated or upset. Some of us even can't make eye contact. There are so many physical cues that you're having an emotional reaction that help you be self-aware, but do you realize that they're there? Also, when you are not dealing with your emotions, does it affect you mentally or socially versus being capable of dealing with your emotions? Again, is there a social, mental, or physical consequence? Sure. And so one of the exercises I'll put in front of you that actually, again, comes from that resource, the EQ Edge, is a wonderful activity. We love to put a group through this. So what we do is we just say, you know what, get in tune with yourselves. Know what your triggers are. And so on this screen, you can see on the left-hand side, there's just a sample of emotions, anger, anxiety, fear, happiness. You just throw out a couple that is super common. And then ask people to think of some time in the recent past where that happened to them. Maybe the anger is, again, we missed a deadline. As a team, we missed a deadline. Or maybe it's, I've got an employee who's lazy. Man, she does not contribute. So you had a frustration or an anger moment. Well, what happened to you physically? I want you to think back. Well, pretty sure that I rolled my eyes when I got the email saying she wasn't coming in again today. And that, yep, her project's not done. And now I have to do the work. So I also think my neck got tense. My heart rate went up because now I'm super mad. And then what happened mentally? Maybe you lost focus because you were so annoyed for like 30 minutes. That's all you could think about. Why do we still have this person here? Why haven't we fired them yet? All your mind is doing is looping to the frustration that this person caused. And then you put down what happened to you socially because of that anger. And this is where you learn, right? Because people will start to reflect, well, you know what? When I called my spouse or my significant other at lunch to let them know they needed to do something tonight, I probably was pretty curt. Yeah, I was short and to the point. Or when I saw an employee in the hallway and they said, hey, how's it going? I'm pretty sure I didn't even look up and just said, good. There are social consequences when we can't be aware of what that is doing to us and that it's happening in the moment. So the last two columns I think are great. It says outcome, good, bad, or neutral, right? You just look back and you learn. And a lot of times they're not great. Sometimes they are good. But then I love to ask the question, how long did it take for you to get back to neutral? The time to refocus. And there are people who, when I do this, they'll tell me that a frustration with one of their employees or peers that happened a month ago is still annoying them. Like sometimes that time to refocus could be a month. Could be some of you listening like to hold that grudge, right? That's okay. You just got to know it. But here's the problem. When we don't have high levels of self-awareness as to the impact that time to refocus has on our team, we don't realize we are an impediment to creating peak moments and creating the outcomes we're intending to create. We're not collaborating. So doing this exercise is a suggestion that I would put in front of you around the concept of self-awareness. Now, we don't have long left, but I do like to throw in a couple of brain teasers, so I got one for you now. I have something on the screen. As soon as you see it, you just kind of need to say to yourself, what do you see? And I sometimes time people and see how fast you can come up with it. And a lot of times, in less than a second, people will say, yep, I can totally see it. She has jumped to conclusions. And I said, great, awesome, except that's not what I had on there. And then we have that realization moment when we say, well, what did we all just do? For those of you who saw jump to conclusions, what did we do? Well, sure enough, we jumped to conclusions. This one thing is driven nearly solely by the skill in the decision-making wheel of EQI 2.0 of impulse control. Impulse control is the skill in EI that has the ability for us to resist or delay that impulse to jump to a conclusion. As team members, as family members, as friends, man, if we had a chart to see how often we see something and maybe get half the picture and jump to a conclusion, many of us would probably be shocked at how often it happens. But to the detriment, usually, of the people involved. Because Impulse control is the ability to avoid rash behavior and decision-making until you feel ready with full knowledge. It's also putting the brakes on potential behavior that could be irresponsible, like anger or aggression. A lot of times, impulsive people are described as hot-headed. I love that one. Ooh, leap before they look, another favorite of mine. Or even those knee-jerk reaction people. So people will say, oh gosh, I know a guy on our team, man. He jumps in. You don't even have to give him more than one piece of perspective, and he already knows the solution, and it's done. And everybody in the room's rolling their eyes like, whatever, he always does this. The idea, though, is that valuable? Is jumping to conclusions valuable? Most of the time, no. In fact, one of my favorite graphics that we use, that we put together around this, is this activating event scenario. So on the left-hand side, you've got this poke or this prod, right? So an observation happens. And then like lightning, we have an emotional response. We have an observation. It's been a stimuli to our minds, and we have a response. If you take the bottom route and your impulse control is low, you quickly react, whether that be with overexcitement or anger or a quick decision. And most of the time, I'll say 99% plus, that leads to a negative impact on relationships, on teams, on results, and then at the bottom, profitability, of course, and productivity. Versus being aware. So you start with your awareness that I'm having a response, and being able to hit the pause button, which is what I call this skill. Hit the pause button long enough to engage in what we call a surge protector. And your surge protector can be as simple as something like self-talk. So somebody throws out, we should change this process, and you've been thinking about it for a year. And so you say, yes, we should do that. In fact, I've got an idea. Let's do it. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, what? We just brought this up, but you're certain we should do it. What you don't realize is that you didn't think through, prove it, right? Prove that this instinct I have is what everybody else would agree with and we should go do. Because if you slow down with impulse control and have that self-talk moment, then your response can be, hey, I've got an idea. I don't want to assume it's right yet because this is premature, but I'd love to throw it out there. The difference is a peak moment, because the difference between you commandeering the conversation or having a conversation is collaboration, because you get positives then on relationships, on team, on results, and of course on profitability and productivity. So conceptually, I just want you to realize having a awareness is key. You got to start with there, but then engage in your pause button so that can help you respond. Because the key here is you don't want to squelch your emotions, right? You don't want to ignore that you're frustrated. That is not what I'm saying. Your job is to listen to what's going on in your responses and then act accordingly to the benefit of both you and other people. Now, acting accordingly is highly connected to the third skill that I want to point out. And so briefly, I just want to say, if you know what you're seeing in response to your team environment, and you hit pause long enough to have some self-talk, you are going to be much better at emotional expression, which, by the way, is saying and showing how you feel. So it's being expressive both verbally and non-verbally, where you're constantly giving out a message at an emotional level, both with words, tone, volume, and body language. And the key here is absolutely one word: transparency. Can you think about a person on your team who, in a meeting, often when you say, hey, should we do this? What are your thoughts? Actually says, yeah, sure, sounds good. So if you just had a transcript of what was said in the meeting, and you're saying, yeah, John said, sounds good, check. But if you were there, you think, okay, clearly he doesn't agree. Like, he just doesn't think it's worth bringing it up, but you can see it. Because when someone on your team says one thing and shows another, it's a point of confusion. That is not collaboration. This is one of my favorites to work on as a coaching skill. I love being able to help people realize that it's a detriment to your team when you can't be honest, both in words and in nonverbals. I mean, straight to the point where I'll often say the best thing you could do is be transparent. If you're confused, take out your index finger, point right to your furrowed brow and say, you can probably see I'm confused. So if you don't mind, can we just go back 2 paces so that I can make sure I see your perspective? I don't want to miss this. People are much more receptive to honesty and expression than you saying, yeah, sure, I got it, but then showing visually you don't get it and you're not on the same page. That's collaboration. So when you know what you're thinking and you pause long enough to process it, so that you can pick your perfect expression where it's honest and open and you're doing it both verbally and non-verbally. We're now creating this formula for a true win as a team. Although I want to make sure you realize expression is definitely something that is best complemented with the concept of empathy. So you want to make sure that you are being recognizing of the moments of people being in the room and not just you, that the mindsets of what's going on as a team and collaboration is not one-sided. So empathy is the skill of recognizing and appreciating how others feel. And here's a key. It's not just the ability to articulate what you think they're seeing, but to respect they have the right to that perspective. That is, to me, the biggest value add that the definition here can give us. Because, you know what, you can be in that moment where somebody's telling you what they think we should do on this project, and you say, yeah, I don't agree with that. And if you are aware you don't agree, and you are hitting your pause button, and then you express it and you say, hey, I want to point for this furrowed brow, right? I want to tell you, I'm not sure I'm on the same page as you. And you can even say it in a way that is empathetic by letting them know, I can see that you've really thought through this, and your lens is, for you, buttoned down. Obviously, my facial expressions are showing you I got lost, so I'm probably not on the same page. In fact, I can tell you I was thinking at it from a completely different perspective. But if you don't mind, I'm going to take a step back, and I'd love to see, can you journey with me how you got to that perspective? Because maybe that'll help me make sense of this. What you just did was embody all of those 4 skills together. You were aware you weren't on the same page. You paused long enough to think about, let me think why this is valuable to make sure I bring this up. I'm going to express it by being honest. And then I'm going to tell them, I don't disagree with you in a way that makes me tell you you're wrong. I just tell you I'm not on the same page, which means it's okay we don't agree, and you have the right to not see it the way that I do. And if you do that, the credibility and the collaboration gets super powerful. And the key I always tell people is, just when you're trying to be empathetic, avoid the bridge. This is spelled wrong. I totally know that, but it stands for an acronym that we've used here when we teach empathy, that a lot of times when we try to relate to people, many times we do it in a way that is the opposite of empathetic, but we're well-intentioned. So sometimes we belittle or we reject, often even flat ignore someone's perspective, or we might diminish or judge it. So you might have a person on your team who says, guys, I'm not the right person for this. You guys are asking me to do this portion of the project, and I don't think I'm the right person. And so many times we're trying to be empathetic and make them feel better, and we say, no, you're not. That's wrong. You're totally the right person. And what you don't realize is that you just undermined the concept of empathy. They feel like they're the wrong person, and they have the right to feel that. But your job is to find out, why don't they see that? You might think they're the perfect person, but you're never going to collaborate if you just say, yes, you're wrong. You totally are. That's the opposite of empathy. So be careful with empathy, and if that helps you, it's one of our favorite keys, which leads to the last skill that I would point to that contributes from this wheel, this concept of EI, to effective teams. And that, to me, is where it all comes together, and that's serving each other through social responsibility. So to me, social responsibility can be embodied in one phrase: thinking beyond me. When you're in a capacity to collaborate, you can't just think from a siloed point of view. Myopic never gets us anywhere with a team. So we have to think about, how do other people see this? And I need to really see, how can what I do contribute beyond us, beyond this room, and how it actually creates our mission and matches up with the stuff bigger than us, even on a department level. And I like this quote. It's from a spiritual leader, and Mata, I think, is a really great person to follow. But once I read that she said this very succinct phrase: serve others, expecting nothing in return. And that, to me, is really what I'm talking about. It's being able to say, I'm going into this knowing that I'm going to try to support this person. I don't know if it's going to get us where I want to go, but that's not the point. The point is, if I go in thinking beyond me, I'm a much more powerful collaborator, and I'm going to get credit for that when we see the outcomes of what that produces. And so in the end, the challenge point for me to you is to really start to think about and answer some questions to drive action. And so the last thing I'm going to give you, and then I'll open it up for just a few minutes of questions, is first, are you creating peak moments? To really reflect on, how often do you walk away from an interaction with even one person as a collective group, and you feel like we did something great there? Like, we really shared ideas, we were respectful, we didn't agree even, but it felt right that we compared notes, versus the times where you just are punching out getting the work done, and you walk away feeling like that, yeah, it was just whelming. Yeah, not a home run, maybe not a complete strikeout, but man, it was just kind of blah, right there in the middle. Because that's not where you want to target. You want to create those peak moments, and then to ask yourself, where can you improve personally, but then also where could you encourage other people to improve, which really can drive towards that collaboration. So with that, I'm giving you a couple of challenge points, asking you to think about something. I'm going to leave it with my last slide, which is just my contact information. I tell you, I am such passionate about both the collaborative idea of team effectiveness and then also emotional intelligence. If I can ever be a resource to any of you, please let me know. And Sherry, happy to, we have just a couple minutes left, entertain any questions if they came up. But thank you both to MHS, HR.com, and then the group listening today for taking a time to spend an hour with me on this topic.
Hey, Sarah, there are a couple of questions that did come in. So let me just read a couple of them for you. So, sorry, are there EQ assessments that you could recommend?
Of course. One of my favorites is the one I've been actually profiling. So the model that you saw on the screen is connected to the EQI 2.0. And if you were to do a quick search on that tool or MHS, you'll find it's very accessible. I happen to be certified in the tool and use it regularly, both as a coach and as a team and a talent solutions person coming in as a consultant, and heavily recommended. It's one of my favorites, very powerful and very useful once you see the breadth of what it offers.
Great. Another one. Would an icy stare and dirty look be considered an emotion?
You know what? Great question. I love it. So what that is, that's expression of an emotion. So if you have an icy stare or a dirty look, it's disagreement or discontent. So it's the emotion that's causing the expression. And you know what? Sometimes we can actually feel that frustrated. The key is know that you're doing it. That's self-awareness. And two, be transparent and bring up to the attention of the group. You can say to a group, guys, I'm sure it's written all over my face. I am shocked about what I just heard. I'm just shocked. And you know, I'm just going to own that for a moment and ask, is anybody else shocked? And then what can we do about it? Because if I'm shocked, I know I'm not going to process this during our conversation. Maybe we should halt this meeting until we learn more. You can use that and still get a facilitated outcome. I think it's the people who use it and don't admit it and don't own up to the why that are low in EI. And they always usually create those negative results. So great question.
If members on the leadership or in leadership don't embody these qualities, what do you do?
Oh gosh, one of my favorite questions. Gosh, I can't tell you how many times I'll train at the manager level, and the first thing they'll say is, "This was great. Can you train our leaders?" And I always say, I appreciate the awareness that others need to have this too. And you have to go on this paradigm. Assuming they don't get formal training, what can you do? What's within your control? And my favorite is to say, if you just learn something that you think is powerful for you or your team, then you use that as an opening to a conversation. And you say, hey, Sarah, I'd love to talk to you about something I just learned, and I feel like this is something we could really use or at least consider using. And I'd like to share with you what I see about myself, and I would love to know what you see and how you contribute or the leadership contributes, and more importantly, how could we get a more powerful action plan that could really make a difference? Because when you bring it up in a vulnerable way, but a very respectful way, you'd be surprised how often they're willing to entertain the conversation. But I think saying nothing changes nothing. Saying something might not change something, but at least there's a chance. So I'm always a fan of at least bringing it up.
And I think we have time for just one last question. There are still a few in here, sorry, what are your thoughts on having an EQ component to your performance management suite?
Okay, whoever put that in there, I am knuckling you and high-fiving you virtually, because I think that is absolutely amazing. The idea of being able to connect not just what somebody knows technically as a performance metric, but how they leverage that knowledge with all these skills, being productive, assertive, being flexible to a positive degree, having reality testing and problem-solving skills. Could not be a bigger fan. And I think there's a real way you can do that, because it's almost always linked directly to the competencies in your performance model. Nobody's just been overt about connecting the dots to EI and using the assessment. And there's a 360 component, by the way, to the model that we use. It's always an option. So consider it, because it's very powerful if you do it.
And it does look like we're out of time, Sarah.
Okay.
Well, I would like to thank you very much. This has been a fabulous and very informative webcast, and you can definitely hear the passion in your voice. So thank you for presenting this for us today, and as well to MHS for sponsoring it for us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, just a few reminders for the attendees. If you would like to view this webcast again, and that's been a very popular question today, the archive recording and slides will be available on hr.com, and they'll be there this afternoon later today. Then they will be available for you for up to 7 days for our free members and without restrictions for those of you with the certification membership. All webcast credits are stored in your hr.com account. Watch for your hr.com email to arrive within 2 business days, and it will also contain the certification credit information. Your feedback is very important to us, so please do take a few moments to fill out the exit survey that will appear on your screen once this webcast has ended. And this does conclude our webcast. And again, Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you.